Where is the evidence of my crime? An accusation that condemns me to a moral death.
If it had been done to me, what has been done to you, I would not go to church anymore.
Holy man of God, will you please pray for me?
My body may be withering away, but my soul is not.
This is Criteria.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Criteria. I'm Thomas Miras, and I'm here with my co-host James Majewski. Hey James.
Hey Thomas.
And we're here to give our first impressions of a new film titled Man of God. It's a Greek production, which will be released in the US on March 21st. It's about one of the most famous saints in Eastern Orthodoxy, and particularly in Greek Orthodoxy, Saint Nektarios of Aegina. And this is a saint that I hadn't heard about before, but apparently, even though he was, I think, canonized by the Orthodox Church in the 1960s and lived in the late 19th, early 20th century, he is very, very famous. Like, you won't find a church in Greece that doesn't have an icon of Saint Nectarios. So a very important figure. The film was written and directed by a Serbian Orthodox woman named Jelena Popovic. She is a writer, director, producer, has been an actor in the past, spent many years in LA. She co-founded with her husband this production company, Simeon Entertainment, which is developing, producing, and distributing independent films in a number of genres, but with this sort of idea of supporting good values. And she's religious herself, so this film is not only about an Orthodox saint, but it's from the perspective of an Orthodox believer. The lead role, Saint Nectarios, is played by a Greek actor who's very well known, and another of the major roles of Costas is played by a pretty well known Russian actor named Alexander Petrov. And then the third sort of most well known actor in this film is an American actor, Mickey Rourke, who is himself a Roman Catholic, and took the role partly for that reason, because he believed in the message of the story. And I don't know, James, you hadn't heard of this saint before, had you?
No, yeah, I wasn't even like sure what we were supposed to feel about like a non-Roman Catholic saint, you know.
I'll buy it. I kind of take it like they have sacraments, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
They believe mostly the same things we do, and sainthood is not simply a matter of being canonized, obviously. Aside from like the life of holiness in itself, it's also something that canonization usually happens after the development organically of a cult. And, this man was beloved in his lifetime of a lot of people as a holy man. He was known for miracles both in and after his earthly life. And so, I tend to credit those things, generally speaking. I had no problem with sort of accepting this as a saint in some real sense.
Yeah, well, having watched the movie, I definitely have no problem with it.
Right. Yeah. So, and it's also interesting because this is a figure who was not treated well by the church authorities of his time. He was a metropolitan, so I guess that's the equivalent of a bishop. And some people thought he was next in line to become the next patriarch of Alexandria, I guess, or of Egypt. But that's sort of where the troubles in the film begin, because of jealousy that he is sort of the favorite of the reigning patriarch, who's a very old man, Patriarch Sophronius. People are spreading slander about Nectarios, which unfortunately Sophronius seems to believe we don't quite get a sense of why that is. And he ends up basically losing his position, and basically just going into exile, going back to Greece. But because of this slander following him and politics in the Orthodox churches, he's has trouble finding a stable position anywhere. He eventually takes a position as a preacher in a poor island that nobody wants to go to. His reputation grows there, and he gets appointed as the I guess the religious in charge of the religious education and spiritual formation of the seminarians there. And then from there, he ends up founding a monastery when some young women who wish to become nuns ask for his guidance. And he found this on the island of Aegina, which I guess is why he is called Saint Nectarios of Aegina, because that's where he died. But throughout the film, we see him struggling with mainly with persecution and slander from his peers or his superiors in the Orthodox Church, and then also to some extent from misunderstandings from people close to him as well, I would say. But it is a story of triumph, even though he is from the beginning of the film, I would say, somewhat of a man of sorrows. It's a while into the film before we see him really smile. He has a very sober demeanor. So what was your impression of this character, this saint?
Yeah, well, I think it speaks to one of the strengths of the film, that I, having come into it with just no background knowledge of Saint Nectarios, or really of Eastern Orthodox history or politics or patriarchates or anything like that. And I felt like I was pretty comfortably able to plug in right away and have a good sense of what was going on. And then, what's more, have like a strong impression of the holiness of this man, right? I mean, it's something that I think is readily understandable. The idea of politicking within, sadly within the church, but within any organization. I mean, this is like kind of a type that we understand, the wrongly accused man. So it's just as well that the film doesn't really go into much detail about the nature of those accusations, what precisely he's being accused of, and how all of these machinations work. It's not like a political drama. It's not filled with intrigue. It's really just the sufferings of this man, and their sufferings, their struggles, but they're largely interior. Because on the outside, this is a man of great docility and humility, and I'd say understatement. If there's anything that could, well, it kind of characterizes the tone of the film, really. There's kind of this understated quality to a lot of the performances, the way the lines are delivered.
Certainly the protagonist performance is very understated.
Yeah. Aris Servitalis is the main actor who plays Nektarios, and he's incredible. I mean, his performance in this is just really, really something, because like I was saying, it's not like one of those roles where you get to really just like let it rip and just like, fly off the handle, or like have these moments of like big drama or big emotion. There's a real subduedness to his performance, but it's like this there's something behind his gaze, that I've said it on the podcast before, but this to me is one of the hallmarks of really great film acting. When you can look into the eyes of an actor, and just there's like, it's the windows into a soul, and so this he's playing a holy man. This is something you would hope for in any sort of I think this is a comment that's made a lot about Jonathan Rumi's portrayal of Jesus, is what's contained in the eyes. But yeah, when it comes to the conflict or the struggle or the angst, this is a film that has a lot of angst in it. It's an interior angst that we're given a a sort of window into, in these kind of asides, these moments where in between scenes and in transitions, we see Nectarios alone, praying by himself, muttering, praying under his breath, or doing these
Prostrations.
exactly. And those are shot really kind of really hard close-ups, handheld, shaky angles, low lighting. There's a lot. Those sequences that recur through the film, these brief sort of like peeks behind the curtain into his like dark night of the soul. Those for me kind of exemplify the tone that's really kind of cast over the whole film.
Mm-hmm.
This is a film that's kind of, it's spiritually melancholic.
Right.
It is dark. It's unsaturated. There's not a lot of color.
Right.
It's it's handheld. It's understated. It's and there's lies everywhere, so the picture that it paints is of holiness is not the kind of saccharine holiness that we often get in a saint film. So
Right.
I really appreciated that too.
Yeah. It's definitely like a firmly hagiographical it's definitely a firmly hagiographical film, but it's not a saccharine hagiographical
No
film.
doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
And that's something I actually appreciated about the film, is like how firmly this film exists and confidently in the world of Greek Orthodoxy, that it doesn't really feel the need to explain a ton to us. And at least, thankfully, at least if you were a Roman Catholic, maybe not so easy for Protestants, but it's something that you can just sort of jump into and understand, especially if you have a little bit of familiarity with certain Eastern Christian spiritual practices, like the Jesus prayer, these prostrations that he's making over and over again. We see a lot of that stuff in the film, less, I would say, of the liturgy per se, but I was thinking about the fact that for most of the year, except for at Easter, Eastern Catholics and Eastern Orthodox don't even see the consecration take place, because it takes place behind these doors, behind the iconostasis. And so maybe making that visible on film is less, I could be wrong, but I wonder if making that visible on film is less of an obvious choice for somebody raised in that, somebody who's from that tradition.
Right.
But yeah, we do see a lot of very distinctive Orthodox practices, like the Jesus prayer, the prostrations. It's not a movie that shies away from asceticism and prayer, so it shows those things constantly. It's like a key feature of the film. And unlike, say, A Man for All Seasons or something like that, the asceticism is front and center, the self-denial, the self-abasement of this man. And I think the main thing that struck me about it was the portrayal of, and maybe it's because of the times we live in, where a lot of people are tempted to rebellion of one kind or another against the authorities in the Catholic Church. To see his strong sense of brotherhood and fatherhood with his fellow priests and bishops, and his sense of being a son of the patriarch who brought him into his vocation. This is very strongly felt in the film. It's very strongly felt by Nectarios, and he's able to convey some sense of that to the viewer in a way that I think is very valuable for our time.
Definitely.
I don't know if this is a similar issue in in the Eastern world, but it certainly is something that we're dealing with right now in the Latin world. And so I found that very striking. That was my biggest takeaway from the film, was that of how meek this saint is, and how he continues to see the father who has believed lies about him and is mistreating him for that reason, and not even giving him the time of day, not even responding to his letters to defend himself or anything like that, not even granting him an audience. that he still sees him till the very end as a spiritual father, which is why when towards the end of the film, this patriarch dies, and he attends his funeral, or he attends the synod for the election of a new patriarch, and we see him at his tomb speaking to him, words that are somewhat reproachful. That's all the more powerful because mostly what has characterized his reaction is a refusal to play political games, to try to get the upper hand. There are people who are friends of Nectarios who are trying to exert pressure to get things done, or trying to get him to be more ambitious, or telling him what what is his real desert, as a man of God. He should be a patriarch. It's intolerable to them that he's not the patriarch, and that he is so indifferent to that. And then finally we do see him letting loose, not in a passionate way, but at the end speaking in front of the tomb of this patriarch Sophronius, and saying, I forget exactly what his lines are, but he's basically saying, you mistreated me.
Yeah.
To put it simply. And that's all the more moving because of his restraint throughout the film.
That's right. And I think that it's important to, that's one of the things this film I think does really well, is show the sort of different contours of this meekness, and this sense of obedience, right? Because he will not lift a finger to strike back at anyone who strikes at him. But when later in the film, his monastery is under threat precisely because they're trying to get at him. And it's not just affecting him now, but it's affecting the lives and the vocations of the women the nuns who have been entrusted to him. We see him take a different tack.
Yeah. And this is something he explains in the film.
Exactly. And again, that scene that you are referring to, when he's offering this pained prayer, really, in front of the tomb of his father, his spiritual father. We understand that. We understand the context for this reproach, but it also casts all of the obedience that we've seen up to this point into a different light as well. This is not a man who's not aware of what's going on. He's not naive. He's not a dummy. But he knows who he is. And I think that's really what the movie's about, right? It's called Man of God. Right. And this is where his obedience comes from. It comes from knowing who he is.
Yeah.
And knowing who he is in relationship, not just to God, but to the church, and to all these spiritual relationships of fatherhood that are present throughout the film, and so it's kind of it was kind of I won't say it was a surprise, because it wasn't like I was expecting anything. It's just that I wasn't expecting anything. This movie was not on my radar, and neither was this saint. But I'm very pleasantly surprised to have to have this film out now.
Yeah. The movie had been on my radar because I had heard that the score was by Zbigniew Preissner, who did the music, collaborated with the great Polish director Krzysztof Kieślowski a lot, and composed the soundtrack to the Decalogue series that we discussed recently on this podcast. And so he has a nice, very, very, I suppose, very Greek inflected score for this film. And it's like, it's very understated, as his music tends to be, and as this film is.
Right. And I
so
like
that's
too
why it was
that
on my radar.
I like that liturgical chant features prominently throughout the film as well. Another aspect, the way in which it's not shying away from its subject. This is very much an Eastern Orthodox story.
Yeah, apparently this film, it's interesting. Yeah, it does exist very comfortably in that realm, and I wonder if that is a matter as much of the difference in relation between religion and culture in Eastern Europe as it is maybe this filmmaker's willingness to go out on a limb, or this being a film specifically for religious audiences. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question, but I just wonder if that's something that people are more comfortable. At the very least, look, these are Orthodox countries. The U.S. is not a Catholic country,
right?
So they have that context. It's not exotic for them, obviously,
right.
And so. Yeah, apparently this film did pretty well in its release in Greece and other parts of Europe. It won the audience award at the Moscow Film Festival, so it seems to have done pretty well, and we'll see how it does in the U.S. But I enjoyed it, and it's also, I thought that it was a well shot film, and the aesthetic was not as sort of like. Well, let's put it this way. It came off as a film that was directed and, DP'd by someone who is into cinema, as opposed to somebody who is sort of went to, with what we see in some religious productions in the U.S., where clearly this person went to film school and they are, doing what one might expect in a well-produced episode of television or something.
Right.
This comes off more as like they had a particular style that they wanted to go for, and it wasn't just competent production quality. They were going for something specific in the style.
That's right. Because there are moments where when it works, when the cinematography works, it works. And there are numerous moments that I could point to, but one that I'll mention without going into too much detail, because I don't want to give anything away, is the ending. The ending, I think, is just magnificent. Like, this is kind of, I mean, this is a challenge for any story. How do you end it? The ending changes everything about what you've seen before. But it seems to be like a particular problem with a particular challenge, I should say, with a saint movie, right? Because it's like we know how this ends,
right?
They're a saint, but the sort of the scenario that they've crafted for how they end this film, and which features Mickey Rourke. It's the only point where Mickey Rourke shows up in the movie. So for American audiences who are expecting that Mickey Rourke is going to have some sort of substantial supporting role in this film, they might be a little surprised, because he shows up only for the last 5 minutes of this movie, but those last 5 minutes are crucial, and they're very well done, and the elements that. The strong elements that are present in this film, they really are brought to bear very effectively at the end. I don't know that I want to go into much more detail than that, but it's quite remarkable.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, so the film again is Man of God, and comes out on March 21st, hopefully in a theater near you. Be sure to check that out, and we'll see you next time.